The following are two stories about men who were able to predict the future in their dreams. David Booth. In 1979, David Booth from Cincinnati, Ohio, was an office manager at a car rental agency at Cincinnati Airport. On May 15, 1979, David's life took an unusual turn, where he started to have horrific nightmares, where he dreamt of an airplane taking off, where one of its engines fell off, causing it to crash in flames and killing everyone on board. For David, it was not like an ordinary dream and appeared totally realistic. Unfortunately, that would only be the beginning of a series of nightmares where he continued to have the same dream. He dreamt of a silver American Airlines plane taking off from a busy airport before flipping upside down and plummeting to earth. It had narrowly missed a building before crashing into an open field. Could it be that David was prophesying a plane crash that hadn't yet taken place? After the same realistic dream, night after night, David felt he had to warn the authorities and called the Federal Aviation Administration. He spoke to Jack Barker, who at the time was the primary spokesperson for the FAA. Jack had received many strange phone calls, but found what David had to say perfectly rational and not the rantings of a crazy person. But it was the first time that someone had called to warn him about something that had not yet happened. But he was unable to take any action because David could not give him the name of the city it would take place in or the flight number, so there was nothing substantial to go on for the FAA to take action. The nightmares continued every night, and each one was more vivid than the last. By May 25th, David was desperate and again called Jack Barker at the FAA, as it was seriously disturbing him. Jack Barker was also frustrated because there was still not enough information to go on, and he couldn't just ground every American airline because of somebody's dream. It was only a few hours after David's last phone call when tragedy struck. On the afternoon of May the 25th, 1979, domestic passenger flight from O'Hare International Airport in Chicago en route to Los Angeles International Airport was taking off from runway 32R at O'Hare International when its left engine detached from the wing, causing a loss of control. The aircraft crashed about 4,600 feet from the end of the runway, killing all 271 passengers. The plane was an American Airlines Flight 191 McDonnell Douglas DC-10. The disaster was the deadliest aviation accident to have occurred in the United States. David Booth's nightmare had become a tragic reality, and what played out was exactly as he had dreamt, where an American Airlines flight narrowly avoided a building, suddenly crashes in an open field after the engine fell off, killing all passengers. The incident would haunt David Booth all his life up until his death in 2011. There is no doubt that David Booth clearly saw, not just once, but on many occasions, the exact details of an airline crash in his dreams just weeks before the actual event. Was this undeniable evidence of a genuine premonition? There have been many cases throughout history where people predicted certain events that would happen, and many actually predicted their own demise. So, how can people dream of something that hasn't yet happened? Is it an ancient biological mechanism that was unique to humans, where our ancestors were able to know ahead of time that there was danger lurking ahead, such as walking on a savanna or in the jungle, and were able to take measures to avoid it by having it predicted in a dream? Is what happened to David Booth more common than we think, but because of life's many taboos on reporting this sort of thing, people prefer to keep quiet about it for fear of ridicule, such as the FAA failing to report it? Chris Robinson. In 1989, Chris Robinson from Bedfordshire, England, started having strange dreams full of cryptic type messages that he did not understand. In early 1990, the dreams got disturbing, and the strangest thing was that he found that his dreams were coming true, and he started giving information to the police. His dreams are so accurate that the police started to listen to what he was saying to them. Shortly after having the dreams, he would immediately take notes, but his dreams were not literal, but seemed to be coded or cryptic. Eventually, he worked out what the cryptic messages meant. Dogs would mean terrorists, fish were terrorists, about to be caught, snow would mean the situation was imminent and dangerous, and cups would mean victims. He had a series of dreams about an Air Force base and then saw dogs in a graveyard and immediately knew that the dogs meant terrorists. He then saw clocks ticking and photographic equipment and other unusual symbols that he initially could not work out. Eventually, he was able to decipher that there was going to be an attack at a local base. The nearest base to where he lived was an RAF base at Stanmore Park in Middlesex, and called the base and warned them of an impending attack. However, they were not sure how to deal with his warning, so he decided to drive to the base, which was less than an hour's drive from his home. When he arrived at the main gate, he was nervous and unsure how they would react to his predictions. After telling them that it was a concern that many people could be killed and injured, he was taken to the guard room, where he was interviewed by a duty sergeant called Brian Earl. The RAF police were naturally suspicious about a man turning up at the base and making strange predictions, but nevertheless took notes as Chris explained to them about his strange predictive dreams. The RAF police decided to call the Bedfordshire police to check whether they had any records on Chris Robinson and whether he had a police record or was just a crazy person. The police said they knew Chris and were able to assist them with his dreams. Shortly after Chris had visited the base, a television news item claimed that 2 people were being questioned by police after a bomb went off at an RAF administration depot at Stanmore in northwest London. Chris said that he initially felt shock and horror, but after finding out that nobody had been injured, he was delighted and felt vindicated because his dreams proved to be correct. He then put together his dream about the dogs representing the terrorists and worked out that the ticking clocks had represented the bombs. He was initially confused as to why he dreamt about photographic equipment, but later found that the building that had been destroyed was a store where the RAF had kept their photographic equipment, which in this case was not at all cryptic but factual. Unfortunately for Chris, the authorities believed it was a lucky guess because over the previous months other bases in the region had been attacked, so what Chris had dreamt was just a coincidence. Because of Chris's prediction, police were suspicious of him and interviewed him about the terrorist attack that had taken place in May 1990. On another occasion, Chris had had a series of dreams about an airfield where he saw rockets, airplanes and explosions in the sky and crowns falling down. He contacted the Bedfordshire police and described what he'd seen in his dreams. In his next dream, the crowns falling from the sky became parachutes, and Chris realised that the falling parachutes told him there was going to be an air disaster, but he did not know where or when. A short time later, Chris found that there was going to be a major aviation display at Fairford in Gloucestershire called the International Air Tattoo. He decided to drive to the air show, but didn't realise at the time that one of his dreams would shortly take place in front of him. As he arrived at the base, he saw 2 fighter planes collide and told the shocked onlookers not to worry because in his dream, the 2 pilots would parachute to safety, which they did. The news said that 2 Russian fighter jets had collided at the air show where the pilots safely ejected. He said he was in the right place at the right time and knew exactly what would happen. The Russian pilots did not know their fate, but Chris did. The police decided to put him in contact with a Dr. Keith Hearn from the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research. In November 1991, Chris approached Dr. Hearn about an ongoing dream that he believed was a premonition. He believed the dream was about 2 terrorists from the IRA planting a bomb in a bank in St Albans in North London. In the dream, Chris said he was looking down at St Albans Abbey and there were 2 dogs running through the park and knew that in his cryptic messages dogs were either killers or terrorists. In his dream, the dogs became human and he could see a man and a woman running, and then they walked along the high street where one of them was carrying a padded envelope which they then placed inside the letterbox of the bank. There was an explosion which killed the terrorists and they were the only casualties, and then he woke up from the dream. He went to the nearby police station in Luton and told them he believed a bomb would be planted at a bank on the Friday evening. The police told him to go home where they would later contact him if anything arose. That Friday evening he received a call from Sergeant Clements informing him that all hell had broken loose in the high street of St Albans and asked him to come to the police station. That evening he had a meeting with police and military people at the station. They informed him that it was not a bank but a car bomb that had exploded, but Chris insisted it was a bank and definitely not a car bomb, as they'd placed the envelope in the letterbox. After a short while, the police said, "Okay, you were right, it was a bank," and they were just testing him. Chris visited the crime scene and saw body parts scattered about, and the front of the bank had been completely destroyed. Dr. Keith Hearn claimed that the information he'd received from Chris about his dreams before the terrorist attack proved to be totally accurate in every account. With his premonitions, Chris Robinson claims that we think we know what's going on, but we really don't. In his dreams, he has perceptions that he is meeting up with the deceased people, and somehow the deceased people have access to information that we do not normally have access to. He said that when we're receiving information from the other side, it is very difficult to clearly pass on the message due to interference of some kind. That when we do receive the information, it only comes in coded and cryptic form, and it is even more difficult when the knowledge to be passed on has not yet happened, so you need all methods at your disposal.